With Ukraine's full throttle rise in September, Putin's desperation on the Ukrainian front is increasing. While internal conflicts, revolts and psychological collapses in the Russian army consume Russian soldiers, Vladimir Putin has a shortage of military equipment and soldiers to send to the front this week. Vladimir Putin made many radical changes to lessen the impact of his defeats in Ukraine, but these began to push him even more towards his inevitable end. A few days ago, partial mobilization was declared throughout the Russian Federation. Putin's aim was to reinforce the Russian army's eroded military force, but this move backfired sharply. The Russian people are very angry with Putin right now, and Russian cities are boiling like a witch's cauldron with a huge uprising and protests. The Russian army, which has recently experienced extreme problems with military equipment, is stuck on the Ukrainian fronts. The fact that many Russian soldiers still need weapons from the former Soviet-era forced the Russian administration to take a step on this issue. The Russian forces, whose military shipping routes were also cut off in the Ukraine region, are about to consume their ammunition. While waiting for a solution from the Moscow administration, the lack of weapons of the Russian army, which created chaos in the Kremlin, led Russian leader Vladimir Putin to the old weapon and missile systems in the army inventory. Another move of Putin was aimed at the air defense systems and armored vehicles of the Russian army, which were depleted on the battlefield. However, the shock move left Putin's hometown St. Petersburg completely vulnerable to missiles. Satellite images released revealed Putin's desperation and madness in St. Petersburg, one of the two most important cities in Russia and the birthplace of Vladimir Putin. The movements that will change the world agenda revealed by satellite images have been noticed. Those who watched the striking step taken by Putin and the Russian administration were stunned by satellite images. In these satellite images revealed by Finnish media, a movement begins when darkness falls on the anti-aircraft missile bases in the Zelenogorsk region of the Karelian Isthmus northwest of St. Petersburg. A total of 14 anti-aircraft missile batteries are secretly evacuated from St. Petersburg air bases and 4 anti-aircraft bases in this region. For Putin, this could be a very risky move. Partially depriving a city like St. Petersburg of air defense could have crippling consequences for him. The less costly S-300 air defense systems, which are much more numerous than the S-400s in the Russian armed forces, were one of the symbols of the protection of an important city like St. Petersburg. However, this operation initiated by the Russian administration left St. Petersburg vulnerable. The biggest visible change is that the air base southwest of St. Petersburg, 2 of the missile batteries found in this region are among the war equipment evacuated by the Russians. The air base located southwest of St. Petersburg normally contained 100 missile containers. According to information obtained from satellite images, 25 missile containers were lost. Moreover, not only missile containers disappeared, but also a number of missile trucks that had been lying in the open for years. In addition, 10 firing platforms and other military equipment in a base area southeast of St. Petersburg are thought to have been added to the list of war supplies sent to Ukraine. It is presumed that the Russians took this lost equipment on the road to send it to Ukraine. According to the satellite images that shook the agenda, it was understood that the Russians sent all of the old S-300 missile systems in the army equipment only for use in Ukraine. Bases in the vulnerable city of St. Petersburg currently only have Russians 400 missiles for ground attacks. The S-300s are much more functional. For this reason, St. Petersburg is in a target position for any danger that may come from outside. These images, which reveal that both mobile firing platforms and missiles disappear at certain time intervals, show that the Russians thought about this operation plan in advance and that it was a solution to the problem of shortage of military equipment. It turned out that these missile systems, which were removed from the St. Petersburg air bases to support the Russians who were left without ammunition on the Ukrainian front, were old S-300 defense missiles, whose production was stopped within the Russian army. The S-300s, which were first produced in the early 1970s, are much more ineffective than the S-400 missile systems. However, in terms of easy installation and use, the S-300, which the Russian administration plans to send to the soldiers of the trapped army waiting for weapons in Ukraine, have already been removed from the St. Petersburg air base. Russians who are experiencing the nirvana of desperation due to the war in Ukraine are considering targeting innocent civilian Ukrainian citizens again with the S-300 missiles. they secretly removed from this region. There are reports that the Russian army is using S-300 surface-to-air missiles to attack ground targets in Ukraine's Mykolaiv region. Now it is thought that the Russians may again resort to the S-300 missiles to bombard civilian ground targets. Mykolaiv Oblast Governor Vitaly Kim stated on his Twitter account on July 8 that Russian forces are using purpose-built S-300 missiles equipped with GPS navigation and devices to hit ground targets. These statements of Vitaly Kim, governor of Mykolaiv Oblast, also confirmed the brutal plans of the Russians. The use of these S-300 air defense missiles within the Russian army generally includes land targets with a maximum engagement range of 120 kilometers. These missiles have an onboard inertial system that uses the coordinates of the target before launch and is updated in flight via a radio link. The S-300 also uses semi-active radar guidance in its thermal phase. In short, the S-300s, which were secretly transported from St. Petersburg to bombard critical crowded places in Ukraine, are being prepared to be sent to Ukraine. While all these developments continued at full speed, the Ukrainian armed forces signed a miracle. He shared a video of a Ukrainian fighter pilot writing a message to the Russians on an AMG-88 missile mounted on one of the Ukrainian Soviet-made fighters, showing a pylon adapter attached to the fighter's pylon in the video that left its mark on the agenda. The text "You smell radar" on the missile drew attention immediately after the video was shared by the Ukrainian fighter pilot. The Ukrainian Air Force announced that it had started using AGM-88 missiles using the standard LAU-118A launcher mounted on a newly manufactured pylon adapter. How exactly the standard missile launcher is integrated into the MiG-29 systems is still unclear. Its design is kept like a secret by the Ukrainian Air Force. The sensor on the standard launcher is said to work 24/7. This sensor is also powered by an external battery, eliminating the problem of the MiG-29's obsolete Soviet-era electronics. Thanks to the LAU-118A launcher use, the missile range can exceed 150 kilometers. AGM-88 missiles are considered the best option to use, especially to destroy Russian counter batteries. The LAU-118A launcher system of the AGM-88 missiles seems to make the Russians very uneasy, as it destroys the illumination radars of the S-400 missiles. Even Russian media sources claim that the Ukrainian army is trying to use AGM-88 HARM missiles to destroy the illumination radars of the S-400 and Buk M3 anti-aircraft missile systems, which are positioned to provide an air defense system in cursive. One of the biggest reasons for the revolts of the Russian army soldiers against Putin was the old weapons and other military equipment used in the army. For this reason, many Russian soldiers, completely despondent from the war, fled, leaving their weapons and other ammunition on the battlefield, while others were so fed up with the hegemony of Putin and his administration that they could kill themselves. Now the Russian soldiers were tired of being pawns and began to stand against being crushed by the terrible decisions made by the Russian leader. Putin had begun to make very risky decisions, especially in the last 2 months of the war. Now continuing with his radical and risky decisions, Vladimir Putin stunned even his hometown with a shocking attempt about the large number of air defense missiles in the Russian army. The war is heating up. Stay tuned to be informed about developments. Thanks for watching.